COVID-19 outbreak is drastically changing the everyday lives of Minnesotans.
From schools closing to social distancing to slowing the spread of the illness. Right now, COVID-19 doesn't really seem to be impacting children as severely as much as it does in older adults. However, parents still have a lot of questions about this illness.
Dr. Gigi Chawla, the chief of pediatrics at Children's Minnesota, is here. And I imagine you are being asked a million questions from parents and everybody who's concerned about this.
It's a very busy time for us, yes.
We know there's much we don't know, which is a good place to start, I think. But there are some things we know about COVID-19 and kids, and some explanations as to why we're not seeing kids show major symptoms, right?
Well,
any symptoms in many cases.
Right. I think, first of all, this is an evolving situation all across the globe. And there have been very few studies specifically about children, but what we do have is a lot of experience that we're learning from other parts of the world as we, that we can utilize to help us in our learning here. And what we can tell, what some of those small studies, especially out of China, show, where things were at its worst there, is that even in that scenario, there were very few kids who needed to be hospitalized or in the ICU. So I think that tells us that this is really a much more mild illness for kids, and around the rest of the parts of the world that have experienced more significant outbreaks than what we have right now, they're seeing that same phenomenon.
Mild for most children, but we know that this virus can get right at the lungs. What if you have a child with asthma? Does that change the game for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Specifically, if we pivot to adults first, we know that that's true. Adults with chronic health conditions, whether it's asthma, diabetes, even hypertension, there's a growing body of evidence to say that adults who then, with chronic health conditions, who then subsequently get COVID, are at higher risk. For kids, we don't have all of that information yet. We can tell that kids definitely, when they come down with COVID, their experience is much more mild. We would surmise from that even though kids with chronic health conditions have some underlying risk factors, that they too will still get through a COVID situation or illness very well.
Let's talk about some of the practical things that we're all dealing with, and Heather addressed some of these in her good question last night, and as almost all things involving children and parents, the answers are mixed, but right now with kids home from school, would you allow kids to play with a best friend or a cousin or anything like that?
Yeah, I think some of these practical questions of what does social distancing mean and how do you actually accomplish it in order to spread the rate of this illness are really, really critical. And anything that families can do to just kind of hunker down with their own family is great. The play date issue is a really tough one, because you're not just playing with that other child. That child then goes back to their home and is with their adults and with their grandparents. And so it is a situation where you have to be a little bit more thoughtful about what a play date actually means.
Do we know if a kid can pass COVID on to an adult?
So we assume that kids can pass COVID on to adults, yes. That in doing so, kids also have to be symptomatic and producing the respiratory droplets for that contagious experience.
They have to be coughing and sneezing.
They have to be coughing. Now, there's very little sneeze associated with COVID. That's not part of the illness. In fact, that's much more consistent with having a cold or potentially even influenza. But sneezing is not part of what we think of for COVID. It is the coughing on other people that's really the way that this is spread.
A lot of people have been talking about, what's your advice on should our little kids be interacting with their grandparents?
Yeah, little kids and grandparents are a significant challenge because of that risk to their grandparents with their potential underlying health conditions. And so I think we do not want grandparents to feel even more socially isolated, and I would really want to find ways that kids could stay connected with their grandparents in FaceTime or other ways to do that. But the actual interaction between kids and grandparents, we should put a pause on that to really, really think and be thoughtful, since kids who are coughing but don't experience all of the profound effects of COVID could potentially be spreading that to an adult who would be at risk.
Any advice on best practices to make sure we do stay healthy while we're kind of all hanging out together?
Oh yes, thank you for the question. Absolutely. This is the time to really do this social distancing well. And then also, please wash your hands. This virus is exceedingly sensitive to soap and water.
Right.
So please wash your hands often. I think there's been a lot of concern about, can I get it from the surface of something? Yes, COVID does, it can be on a surface and it can live there for probably a few short hours or less, but washing your hands should take care of all of that.
Yeah.
Please do not touch your face and your eyes. I've pulled my hair back so I don't accidentally touch my hair and maybe touch my face. So do some of those really important things. If you wear contacts, think about converting to glasses. You'll play with your eyes less. So very simple things like that. If you're in a restroom or something and you're out and about, don't use the blowers. The blowers are going to blow more potentially germs and droplets around. Use paper towel instead when you're drying your hands. So
Good.
I think
Just
there's
a couple things to kind of give yourself a better
things.
shot.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, Dr. Gigi, we really appreciate you coming on today and answering all these really important questions.
We're going to do a special kid-friendly show on Mid-Morning tomorrow. Honest talk about the outbreak without some of the maybe more scarier headlines. So Dr. Gigi will be back to answer some questions directly from our kid viewers.